Growing up, I always knew my mom had a soft spot for my brother. I didn't mind it much when we were kids. After all, parents have their favorites, right? I'd watch her dote on him, give him special privileges, and even let him get away with things that would have had me grounded for weeks. At first, I thought it was just a phase, something that would change as we grew older, but it didn't. When we became adults, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it wasn't worth making a big deal out of. Maybe she just connected with him differently. Maybe it was just the way she showed love. I convinced myself that it didn't matter. But deep down, something felt off. I remember the first time I really started to notice how deep it ran. It was at a family gathering, one of those rare occasions where we were all together. I'd just had my second child, and I was feeling overwhelmed with trying to balance everything: work, the kids, home life. My mom came over to visit, and I expected some support, maybe even a little praise for keeping everything together. Instead, all she could talk about was how much she admired my brother's kids. "They're so bright," she said. They're really going places. I just feel like they're going to do amazing things." I smiled politely, but inside I was simmering. I had spent hours making sure my kids were comfortable, that they had everything they needed, and that they felt loved. Yet, here she was, throwing all her admiration toward my brother's kids, as if mine didn't even matter. It wasn't just about her words, though. It was the way she said them. She didn't seem to notice that my own children were right there, playing quietly in the corner. It was as if they didn't even exist in her eyes. At first, I let it slide. After all, she was my mom. She was just proud of her grandkids, right? But the more I thought about it, the more the little moments added up. The comments, the gestures, the subtle ways she always seemed to favor my brother's kids over mine. It was the holiday gifts, too. Every year, without fail, she'd buy extravagant presents for my brother's kids: new bikes, designer clothes, the latest gadgets. For my children. It was always something simple, sometimes even secondhand. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe she didn't have the money for anything more. But I knew that wasn't the case. Then, one day, during a family dinner, my mom dropped the bombshell. It was so casual, so matter-of-fact, that I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Well, your brother's kids deserve more than yours," she said, glancing over at me with a smile. I froze. My fork hovered in mid-air, my stomach sinking. "What?" I asked, not sure I'd heard her correctly. "You know, his kids have been through a lot," she explained, shrugging as if it was no big deal. "They really need the extra support. Yours, though, they're fine. You've got everything under control." I felt my pulse quicken. A rush of anger surged through me, followed by a deep, aching hurt. I couldn't believe my own mother would say something like that. It wasn't just about her words, it was the way she so easily dismissed my children, as though they were somehow less deserving. I tried to stay calm. "What do you mean they're fine? What makes you think they don't need as much support?" "Oh, come on, Emily, she said, brushing it off. "Your kids are healthy, they're happy, they're fine. But your brother's kids, they've had a rough time. They need more help, more guidance. It's just the way it is." Her words were cutting, and I felt the weight of them settle heavily in my chest. It wasn't just the favoritism, it was the assumption that I couldn't possibly be doing enough for my children, that they didn't need anything extra because, in her eyes, they had everything they could possibly want. In that moment, I realized I could no longer ignore what was happening. This wasn't just about a few small gestures of love. This was a pattern that ran deep. It was about my mother's constant need to elevate my brother and his family while making mine feel small, invisible even. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the quiet of my living room, thinking. I wasn't sure how I was going to approach this with her, but I knew one thing: I couldn't let it continue. The next day, I called my mom. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront her, but I knew I had to. My children deserved better than this. When I finally spoke to her, I was direct. "Mom, I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. I don't know if you've noticed, but it feels like you favor my brother's kids over mine. And it's hurting me, and it's hurting my kids." She didn't respond right away. I could tell she was taken aback, like she hadn't really considered how I felt. "Emily, you're overreacting," she said after a pause. "I just think your brother's kids have been through more. They need extra attention. It's not about favoritism, it's just about what's best for them." "Best for them?" I repeated, my voice rising. "What about what's best for my kids? Don't you think they need your love and support just as much?" "Well, of course they're fine," she said, the tone in her voice suddenly more dismissive. "I mean, they're not struggling in the same way, it's just different." I had to hold back tears. So my kids don't matter as much. You don't see the ways they need your support. You don't see how your actions are making them feel less important. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. It was as though my words had pierced through the protective walls she'd built around herself. I didn't mean to make you feel that way, she said quietly. I'm sorry, I guess I never really thought about it that way. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for things to change, but deep down, I knew this conversation was just the beginning. It wasn't going to be easy to get her to see things from my perspective, but I was willing to try, because my children deserved better than feeling second best in their own family, and I wasn't about to let them continue to experience that. The moment I heard my mom's words, I was in shock. There I was, sitting at the dinner table with my family, and my mom just casually dropped the bomb. Your brother's kids deserve more than yours. It was as if she was talking about a completely insignificant matter, as if I wouldn't care about it. I felt my stomach turn. How could she say that? And what made it even worse was how easily she dismissed my kids as if they didn't even matter in her eyes. I tried to play it cool, but the anger inside me was bubbling up and I couldn't keep it in anymore.
What do you mean by that? I asked, my voice more steady than I felt.
Well, your brother's kids, they've been through so much. They need more help. Yours, though, they're fine. They don't need the same kind of support, she said with a shrug, as though it was a perfectly logical thing to say. But I was done with excuses. What do you mean they're fine? I asked, my voice tight. Just because they're happy and healthy doesn't mean they don't need your love and support too. Are you really saying they're not worth the same effort? My mom paused for a moment, and I could tell she didn't expect me to push back. It's just that your brother's kids have been through more, she explained slowly. And they really need that extra attention. Yours, well, they're not struggling like that. Struggling like that? I repeated. So just because my kids don't have the same problems doesn't mean they deserve your love and support? That's the message you're sending? She didn't seem to have an answer. Her expression shifted, like she was trying to process what I was saying, but I didn't stop there. You've always treated his kids like they're more important than mine, and it's time you realize that it's hurting me and my children. I won't let them feel less than anyone, not even their cousins, not on my watch. There was a long silence. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the phone, but she didn't know what to say. It was as if I had shattered the illusion she'd been living under. Eventually she muttered, I never meant to make you feel this way, Emily. I'm sorry if I did. But that wasn't enough for me. I wasn't going to just accept an apology. I needed change, and I wasn't going to wait for it to happen on its own. I knew I couldn't just let it go. I had spent too many years ignoring the little digs, the casual remarks, and the growing sense that my mom didn't truly value my children the way she valued my brother's kids. It wasn't just that she treated them better, it was the way she spoke about them, the way she dismissed my kids as if they were somehow not worthy of her attention, care, or support. That last conversation, the one where she so bluntly said my brother's kids deserved more, was the final straw. I needed to confront her. That night, I tossed and turned in bed, trying to figure out how I could even begin to talk to her about this without making it worse. I didn't want to cause a rift, but I also didn't want to allow this situation to fester any longer. The longer I let her treat my kids this way, the more I worried it would affect their self-esteem. I didn't want them growing up thinking they had to earn love or that they were somehow less than their cousins. So, I decided to call her the next day. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew I had to speak my truth. The day after that dinner, I dialed her number and waited for the ringing. When she answered, I felt a knot in my stomach. I wasn't angry anymore, but I was hurt, and I wanted to make sure she understood that. Mom, I started, trying to keep my voice steady. I need to talk to you about something that's been bothering me. I don't know if you've realized this, but it feels like you favor my brother's kids over mine. There was silence on the other end of the line, and for a second I thought she hadn't heard me, but then she responded. Emily, what are you talking about? That's not true. Of course, I love all my grandkids. She said quickly, her voice defensive. I took a deep breath. This wasn't about love. I knew she loved all her grandkids, but love wasn't the issue here. The issue was how she showed that love, or rather, how she didn't show it toward my kids. I know you love them, Mom, but it's about how you treat them, I said, my voice shaking slightly. You shower my brother's kids with attention, gifts, and praise, while Well, they get whatever's left over, and it's not just the gifts or the money, it's how you act. My kids don't feel like they matter as much to you, and that hurts.
I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I don't know what you mean. I do what I can for all of them. It's just that your brother's kids have had a tough time. They really need more support right now.
That was the excuse I had heard for years. They've had a tough time. As if that somehow meant my kids didn't deserve the same level of care and attention. It wasn't just an isolated incident, it was a pattern, and it had been building for years. Mom, I get that they've had a tough time, but that doesn't mean my kids don't need your support too. Just because they don't have the same struggles doesn't mean they're fine without you, I said, my voice firming. I've worked hard to give them everything I can, and I want them to know they're just as important to you. I want them to feel like they matter. There was a long pause. I could hear her breathing, the tension thick in the air. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't ready to back down. I needed her to understand how serious this was. You're saying they're fine, but they don't feel fine, I continued. Every year, it's the same thing. You buy extravagant gifts for my brother's kids, bikes, clothes, electronics, and for mine, a few toys here and there. Sometimes you don't even show up for their birthdays. I'm not asking for the same level of gifts or attention, but I need you to show up. I need you to treat them with the same love and consideration. They're your grandchildren, too. Her voice softened, and I could hear the hint of guilt creeping in. I didn't realize it bothered you that much. I didn't mean to make you feel like they weren't important. I know you didn't mean it, I replied, my heart still heavy. But it's been going on for a long time, and I'm not going to just sit back and let it happen anymore. My kids deserve better than this. They deserve to feel loved, to feel like they're just as valuable as anyone else. They're not second place, Mom. They're my kids. They deserve your time and attention, too. I'm sorry, Emily. I really am, she said, her voice quiet now. I didn't mean to make you feel like that. I guess I didn't realize how much it was affecting you and them. I could feel the tension between us easing, but I wasn't sure if it was enough. I'm glad you're sorry, but I need more than just an apology. I need to see it change. I need you to make an effort to show my kids that they matter to you. I'll try, she said, her tone more sincere now. I promise I'll try. I'll start paying more attention to them. I'll be there for their birthdays. I'll do better. I didn't know if I believed her yet. It wasn't enough for her to just say the words, but it was a start, and that was all I could ask for at that moment. You don't have to buy them extravagant gifts, Mom, I said, my voice softening. But I do need to know you're there for them. I need you to show up, not just with presents, but with love. Because right now it feels like you're choosing one set of grandkids over the other. I understand, she said, and I could hear the sincerity in her voice. I'll work on it. I really will. I wasn't sure if things would change overnight, but I hoped this conversation was a step in the right direction. I hoped that, in time, my mom would understand how much her actions had hurt me and my children. For the first time in a long while, I felt like we had made some progress. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't enough to erase years of favoritism, but it was a start. I just had to wait and see if the words she said would turn into actions. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let this slide anymore. My kids deserved better, and I would fight for them no matter what. I spent the next few weeks trying to process everything that had happened. The conversation with my mom, while an important step, didn't suddenly erase all the hurt. I found myself replaying the words she'd said over and over, wondering if she really understood the depth of the pain I felt. It was clear that her intentions hadn't been malicious, but the damage was done, and that wasn't something that could be fixed overnight. My kids were still trying to understand why Grandma acted the way she did. They had noticed the difference in how they were treated, even if they couldn't articulate it the way I could. It broke my heart to see them looking at me with those confused eyes, as if they were wondering what they had done wrong. I knew I had to protect them from this sense of inadequacy, from the feeling that they weren't enough just as they were. That was what I had tried to prevent by confronting my mom, so my kids wouldn't grow up thinking they had to compete for love and attention. I didn't want them to ever feel less than. But I also knew that healing was a process. It wasn't just about me. It was about the way my mom would need to change her perspective. I couldn't force her to suddenly see things my way, but I could encourage her, guide her, and make it clear that I wouldn't tolerate any more behavior that made my children feel like they were second in line for affection. I needed her to understand that this wasn't just a simple family issue to be swept under the rug. This was about human dignity and the value we all place on each other, especially in a family. Over time, I did notice subtle changes. She started calling more often. At first, it was awkward. I could tell she didn't quite know how to act, like she was walking on eggshells, unsure of how to make up for what had happened. But that was fine. I understood. She had to learn, just like anyone else does when they realize they've hurt someone they love. She started asking about my kids, really asking how they were doing in school, what their interests were, and what made them happy. It wasn't the big gestures, but it was the small things that started to count. She stopped making excuses about why she couldn't be there for their birthdays or why she couldn't spend as much time with them. Instead, she made an effort, and it wasn't perfect, but I could see she was trying. One afternoon, my kids and I visited her house for a family gathering. It wasn't anything special, just a casual get-together, but I could feel the difference in the air. When we arrived, she greeted my kids with genuine excitement, bending down to their level and asking about their lives in a way that felt real. She wasn't just going through the motions or doing it because she had to, she wanted to know. And when the kids were playing, she sat with them, asking them questions about their favorite games, their friends at school, what made them laugh. For the first time in a long while, I saw my kids light up when they were around her. They were enjoying themselves, not out of obligation, but because they felt that love. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't going to be a quick fix, but it was progress, and that was enough for me. As the day went on, I noticed my mom spending more time with my kids than with anyone else. She played with them, listened to their stories, and even helped them with a craft project they were working on. I could tell that she was trying to make up for the years of feeling distant, and she was slowly building those bridges. It wasn't just a grand gesture, it was her way of saying that she was committed to change. And for me, that was all I could ask for. Still, I wasn't entirely free from the lingering resentment. I had to work through my own feelings too. I couldn't help but feel some frustration every time I thought about the years of inequality that had passed. I had been patient, but I had also allowed my mom's favoritism to continue unchecked. The fact that it had gone on for so long without anyone stepping in was a wake-up call for me. I'd spent so much time trying to make everyone happy, trying to please others, that I had neglected my own children's emotional well-being in the process. I couldn't let that happen again. I began to have more conversations with my mom about how we could move forward. I didn't want to just sweep things under the rug because I knew that wouldn't work. I had to be honest with her about my feelings, even if it was uncomfortable. But I also made it clear that I wasn't doing it to attack her. I was doing it because I loved her and I wanted our relationship to be better. One day, after another visit, my mom pulled me aside. I was surprised when she asked me to sit with her as if she had something important to say. "Emily, I want you to know how sorry I am," she said, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I know I haven't always been there for you or your kids the way I should have. I can't change the past, but I want you to know that I'm trying to do better. I can see now how much it meant to you and how much it hurt you." Her words felt like a balm on the wound that had been festering for so long. But it wasn't just the apology that struck me, it was the fact that she recognized her mistakes. That was what I had been waiting for, the acknowledgement that my feelings were valid, that my children mattered, and that I wasn't just making a big deal out of nothing. That acknowledgement meant everything. "I appreciate that, Mom," I said, my voice soft. And I'm willing to move forward. I just need to see the change. We can't go back to the way things were, but I know you're trying, and that means a lot." From then on, I made a conscious effort to let go of the resentment. It wasn't easy, but I had to remind myself that people change, relationships evolve. Sometimes it just takes time, and that's okay. My mom had hurt me, but she was also showing that she wanted to be better for my kids and for me. That was all I could ask for. It wasn't an immediate fix. We still had a lot of work to do. But for the first time in years, I felt like we were on the right path. It would take time for my kids to fully heal from the hurt they had experienced, but seeing them interact with my mom the way they had that day gave me hope. It showed me that change was possible, that love could be rediscovered even after years of neglect. And most importantly, it reminded me that no matter how much I had tried to shield my kids from the pain, they had the capacity to heal. They had the resilience to bounce back from what had happened. I would continue to fight for them to make sure they knew they were worthy of love, of attention, and of being seen for who they truly were. And as for my mom, I hope that this was the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where all of her grandkids were treated equally with the love they all deserved. As time passed, the small changes began to build into something more significant. I started to feel a sense of cautious optimism when it came to my mom's relationship with my kids. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments when I felt that familiar sting of favoritism creeping in, but the difference was that I could now speak up when those moments arose. I had found my voice and I wasn't afraid to use it anymore. The way my mom interacted with my kids had changed. She was more present. She listened more intently to their stories, their dreams, their fears. It wasn't just about the material things anymore, like presents or treats. It was about making them feel valued for who they were. I saw it in the way she'd ask about their day, how she'd remember little details about their lives. She was engaging with them on a deeper level, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room reading a book when I overheard my mom talking to my youngest daughter. She had just finished telling her about something that happened at school, and my mom was listening intently, her eyes soft and thoughtful. You know, my mom said, when I was your age, I used to love drawing too. My mom used to get me all the art supplies I wanted, and I'd spend hours sketching things. What kind of drawings do you like to do? My daughter's eyes lit up, clearly thrilled by the idea of sharing this part of herself with my mom. They began talking about art supplies, and for the first time in a while, I saw my daughter look at my mom with the same warmth and affection that she used to reserve for me. It was a small moment, but it was significant. My mom was really seeing her for who she was, and that meant the world to me. I realized that while the process of healing wasn't instant, it was happening. The scars were slowly fading. I could see that my children were beginning to feel more comfortable around their grandmother. The tension was easing and the emotional distance was shrinking. There was still work to be done, there always is, but things were getting better. That's when I realized something important. This wasn't just about me or my mom. This was about family, about breaking cycles that didn't serve us and creating new patterns of connection. For the first time in my life, I could feel that we were on the cusp of something transformative. I had challenged my mom, I had made my voice heard, and she had responded, and because of that, I saw a better future for all of us. One weekend, my mom invited me over to her house for a quiet evening with just the family. No grand celebrations, no special reason, just an opportunity to spend time together. When we arrived, she greeted us with a warmth I hadn't seen before, and it felt genuine. It was no longer the obligatory hello, or I'm happy to see you because I should be. It was real affection. She had set up a small dinner and had made a special dessert that she knew the kids loved. I watched as my children sat down at the table, feeling at ease, laughing, and chatting with her. I knew in that moment that my mom was doing her best. It wasn't about perfection, it was about effort, and she was giving it. As we all sat around the table, I could feel the sense of belonging growing stronger in my children. They were sharing stories about school, talking about their favorite subjects, and laughing at things they found funny. My mom was engaged, she asked questions, and she smiled when they told their little jokes. It wasn't just a gathering, it was a moment where we were all present, emotionally and mentally. I could see my kids starting to feel a sense of comfort with their grandmother again, and it was like a weight had been lifted off my chest. But it wasn't just about the kids, this was also my chance to continue growing my own relationship with my mom. The conversation turned to something more personal. I could tell my mom was struggling with something, though she didn't say it outright. She was trying to talk about the difficulties she'd been facing, health issues, stress, some regrets from her past, and I realized that this was her way of telling me she was ready to be vulnerable.
I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself because I knew this moment was important. Mom, I said gently, you don't have to do it all by yourself. I'm here. We're here for you.
She looked at me, her eyes soft, filled with both gratitude and uncertainty. I know, Emily, she said. I've always tried to be strong, to hold everything together for everyone, but I'm learning that it's okay to lean on you, on all of you. I felt a knot in my throat as I heard her say that. It was hard to hear, but I also knew it was the truth. My mom had spent so much of her life trying to be the perfect mother and grandmother, trying to prove her worth, that she had never really allowed herself to rely on anyone else. It had taken a toll on her, and that had affected the way she showed up for me and my kids. But hearing her acknowledge that she needed support, hearing her admit that she was learning, was a huge moment for me. It meant that she was breaking down her own walls just like I was. I understand, I said softly. It's okay to let people in, Mom. We want to be there for you too. We're a family. There was a long pause as my mom absorbed the words. Then a small smile appeared on her face. I guess I've been a little too proud for too long, haven't I? She said with a quiet laugh. It's not about pride, Mom. It's about love. And we all need it in different ways. That night, as we cleaned up the kitchen together, my mom and I shared a few more quiet moments. The conversation wasn't heavy, but it was real. I could feel the years of tension and unspoken resentment starting to dissipate. There was no longer any need for pretenses. We were just two people, mother and daughter, working through our past, building a better future.
I knew that we would have more tough conversations in the future. Healing wasn't linear, and there were still wounds to address. But for the first time, I felt hopeful. I had taken the first step in standing up for my kids, for myself, and for my family. And my mom had taken the second step in showing that she was willing to change, that she could learn to give us the love and attention we had always needed.
I wasn't sure what the future would hold, but I knew that if we kept having these conversations, if we kept showing up for each other, we could build something strong. Something that would last. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it would be real, and sometimes that's all you can ask for.